One of our podcast sponsors is a family of film festivals, the Brightside Tavern Film Festival in Jersey City, the Point Lookout Film Festival on Long Island, and the Hang On to Your Shorts Film Festival in Asbury Park. Find them all on Film Freeway, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The Brightside Tavern Film Festival takes place the first weekend of August. Also, be sure to visit iTunes or ashareduniverse.com to tune into the official Hang On to Your Shorts podcast. My Comic Shop History is sponsored in part by Acme Comics, the oldest and largest comic book store in Greensboro, North Carolina. Acme is a full-service, multiple Eisner Award-nominated business. Visit them when traveling or online now at acmecomics.com. And be sure to follow store manager Jermaine Exum on Twitter at Lord Retail, and tune in Tuesday evenings for his early new release comics reviews. They say if you live one place long enough, you are that place. My name is Anthony Desiato, and I've lived in Westchester, New York my entire life. This season, I'll be telling my county's story through her comic shops, the quintessential stores of the area and the era that are now no more. Everything comes full circle this season with the final piece of My Comic Shop History. Welcome to My Comic Shop History. I am your host, Anthony Desiato. I am on location here today in Scarsdale on Central Avenue at American Legends, formerly known as One If by Cards, Two If by Comics. And I'm here with store co-owner, Mark Rubin.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for coming in.
It feels weird to just say Mark and not Mark and Donna.
She's
wife
about 30 feet away, so...
Yes. You're your wife and co-owner.
Yes.
And I was thinking about this in advance of today. I don't think in all these years I've ever heard anyone refer to you individually. It's like always a unit. It's always Mark and Donna.
Yes. We've been told that we have one mind between us, so...
So she is here. She's watching the front of the store while we do this. But you're actually going to trade off, and she will join me for the after show that we're going to do. So listeners will have the opportunity to hear from her, and I'm excited to talk to her as well. But I'm so, I really admire everything that the two of you have built personally and professionally. This store and this episode is kind of in its own category this season because the general theme of the season is, sadly, the lost comic shops of Westchester. And the other 5 stores that we've been discussing this season are all completely gone. Whereas in this case, you are, of course, still here in your original location. The two of you are the original owners. But in 2002, on the store's 10th anniversary, I know you rebranded as American Legends.
Yes.
So the version of the store that I shopped at for a period of time in the late 90s, that version is no more, but the store is still here.
Yes, we're still around, still kicking. Although it's interesting because we've had people come in the last 5 or 10 years and have said on occasion, oh, I used to know the owners here. And we just kind of look at each other and we pretty much look the same as we did when we opened. And we think, yeah, well, it's still us. But.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that you're still here. And, I hadn't been here in 20 years. I don't know. And then, so just, a quick recap of my comic shop history. After my original store, Heroes World, closed, I started a pull list at Alternate Realities, just a little bit up the road
not
here.
Too far. And
I was there for a period of time, and listeners will be surprised by this, I was into sports. I was into basketball, and specifically basketball cards, big time in elementary school. And so I actually made the switch from Alternate Realities to One If. And I was a regular here for, I don't know the exact amount of time, but it was a decent stretch. And I got my comics and my basketball cards here. And then eventually my interest in basketball and the card collecting kind of diminished. And that's when I went back to Alternate Realities, eventually started working there, and the rest is literally my comic shop history.
Well, you can't beat the employee discount either, so.
Oh, there is that. But so, I really had that period of time where, One If really is a big part of my comic shop history. And, I feel bad that I never came back.
That's all good.
After that. So a few months back, my wife and I stopped in just to chat with you and your wife and to talk about doing the podcast. And it was the first time that I was in here really in about 20 years. It was amazing. And it was great to see both of you and to be able to interact with you. I mean, I was in here as a little kid, so now to come back as an adult and actually have a conversation with you.
It's funny too because we celebrated our 25th anniversary about a year and a half ago in the store, and we did a big thing. We had a big lead up to it. The actual date was November 11th, and we had people coming in for the week leading up to it. And on that day, we had so many old customers come in, and particularly ones who were your age or even younger, who we hadn't seen in 20, even 25 years. And you look at them and you know there's somebody, and you're trying to kind of do like a facial recognition and project them into the future. And some people you can do it on, some people you can't. But it's amazing watching people grow up from the time they were kids now to they have their adulthood, and they have their kids of their own, and some of their kids are into collectibles. It's kind of nice.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a wonderful thing. The fact that you have the opportunity to see that you've been here so long, when, again, as we've been talking about all these other stores in the area, most have faded away. So the fact that you're still here, really, it's very impressive.
Well, thank you. It's funny, too. It's funny you should mention that also, just because a week ago we had someone like that who, he was a customer when we first opened, and he had come in to sell some Silver Age books. And we started talking, and he started to smile. And when he first came in here, he was probably 12 or 13. And he's got a full beard and a thick head of hair. And once he smiled, I'm like, Ramon, that's you, isn't it? And he's like, yeah, that's me. And it's just so funny. You could still pick the people out.
That's very cool. And I know when I emailed you first about doing this podcast, and you said you remembered me just from the name.
I could actually visualize your name on the comic file sheet.
Oh, okay. What if, that might be a weird question, but what if any memories of me do you have from that time?
I have to admit the early to late 90s were just a complete blur. We had just launched the business, and we were still, from the first 2 years we were open, we worked every single day, and we were open 7 days a week, and we had long hours, but we were in our 20s, so it was fine. And even into the mid and late 90s, we were still working 6 days a week, and weeks and months would just go by and blur together. And I honestly couldn't tell you what happened for most of the 90s. It was just it was a lot of fun, but it really was a lot of work. And the days bled together. They were long days and long nights, but we were young, and it was a lot of fun. The business was booming, and I'll never forget it. I mean, I'll never forget the whole concept of it. Specific things I will absolutely forget.
Yeah. No, I mean, I completely understand, everything kind of blurring together. That's been a common theme as we've been reminiscing about
it's age.
A lot of these stores. But, it's a lot of time that passed, certainly. So I guess take me to the beginning and the opening of the store. Now, I know you had a background, right? You had been the manager of a baseball card store?
Yeah, so the Dragon's Den used to be across the street from our current location. Actually, they had started out in a little further south, 2 miles south on Central Avenue in Yonkers. And it opened when I was in high school. And I wandered across the street in 1982, and I started talking to the owners about baseball cards, and they kind of looked at each other, and they're like, we should hire this kid. So I started working for them, and I worked for them through high school, and went to college, and I would work for them during the summer times and during the school breaks. And then when I got out of college, didn't really have an idea what I wanted to do. I had a business degree, and they were making just like boffo money. It was 1987, and baseball cards were exploding, comic books were exploding. Batman was coming out 2 years later, and it was just really the tidal wave of the collectibles business. And if I always talk about things were crazy here in the 90s, but in the late 80s and early 90s, it was that to like the 10th power. I mean, everybody was talking about it. It was speculation of the highest order, and that kind of gave me the basis I needed to start our business. Donna and I met a year or so later. She was doing public relations. We had talked about maybe let's have a business at some point together. And the way things just kind of worked out, the opportunity presented itself in '92. She worked for the Den also for a year, and we kind of had a falling out with ownership over the way we wanted to do things. And we said, you know what, we can do our own thing. Let's do our own thing. And we launched in November of '92. And wow, here we are 27 years later. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Oh, it's so interesting. So, I read the About section on your website, and I know it said, you had worked and managed at a store. I didn't realize it was Dragon's Den specifically. That will be featured, Dragon's Den will be featured in a later episode in this season of My Comic Shop
That'll be
History.
the Hollywood, true Hollywood story of the...
I have one of the former customers there, so it'll be a little different perspective. Not so much behind the scenes, but more about, what the store was like generally, and specifically the cross-county location, because obviously they had multiple. So you left Dragon's Den and opened your store right across the street.
Yes, there was nothing pernicious about this, I assure you. We actually, things started to go downhill in the summer of 92 over there for us personally. And we kind of knew something was in the offing. And just, when you're butting heads with your boss on a daily basis, things are just not going to go well. So Don and I started to have more detailed discussions about, all right, what's our next move? And things kind of came to a head Labor Day weekend of 92. And right after that, we were sitting around at home that night and we were talking and we were like, we could totally do this. And we, that week, we started to research different locations up and down Central Avenue. And there were, as your listeners probably know, there were a ton of stores. You had Alternate Realities, you had New York Sports Fan.
And Alternate had just opened in June of 92.
Right. And there was the collectibles store also. I forget their name. But they were also like a mile south of here. And so we were like, all right, we need to be on Central Avenue. I've grown up here my entire life since I was like 8 or 9. So this is a highly trafficked road. This is where we want to be. So we went up and down the strip. We looked at different spots. We even looked on Route 119 in Tarrytown. And, it's a decent area, but it just doesn't have the traffic of Central Avenue. I mean, this is kind of like the Sunrise Highway of Westchester. So we looked around, we saw the spot, and we're like, well, being across the street from the Den could have advantages. People are going to stumble across us, and that's exactly what happened. So the first few weeks we were open was the death of Superman. And
that's right.
When they ran out of the books across the street, a lot of people found us.
Yeah, I mean, because I was thinking about that in advance of today, the selection of the location, because when Steve Odo has talked about selecting the location for Alternate Realities, and his concern was he even felt he was too close to Dragon's Den. And so at the time, that you opened, it was right across the street, and Alternate Realities was still here. But, I mean, I could see it making sense, because clearly there's an appetite for comics in this area, right? And now if there are people who were dissatisfied with their previous shopping experience, now they have a very easy alternative.
What's interesting too, I think more so about the comic collectors that we had coming in, more than the card collectors rather, almost all the people who bought comics here shopped at all the stores, because comic people are always looking for something else, and everyone kind of had their own little niche. Even the Dragon's Den that carried literally everything, they didn't have absolutely everything that people wanted. So they went to Alternate Realities. They came here. They went to other places. Whereas baseball cards were a little more uniform. So they would either go here, they'd go there. But comic people were very, very much ones to go a little bit everywhere.
Not to go off on too much of a tangent, but just as a little bit of prep for the Dragon's Den episode, because I don't know the answer to this. What was the ownership structure? Because I know they had multiple locations. How was this set up?
So when we left, if memory serves me, Fred was one of the major owners, and he was the working owner. So I had known him for 10 years. I'd worked under him for 10 years. I'd actually been at the Den before he was associated with them. And then they had a bunch of silent partners, and then they had a couple of other people who were involved, and I wasn't exactly sure what the ownership situation was. And Cross County was a completely different situation, so I'm not 100% certain about that.
Sure. And then, I mean, if you don't mind me asking, when you opened, I mean, did you tell them what you were going to do, or did you?
Oh, no. It's funny. So after the Labor Day blow-up, which pretty much ended my 10-year employ with the Dragon's Den, I've actually not spoken to Fred since 1992. And it's kind of strange to see someone almost every day for 10 years and then never see them again.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. So we, I didn't really feel sheepish about it, because realistically, Everyone's got to do what's best for them. I don't think we really made that much of a difference in their business because things were just exploding then. So, I think we actually wound up feeding off each other until they ultimately went out of business. But that was, I think, more on them than on us.
Right. Now, I'm sure this is something that you've been asked a lot over the years, but I've not had the opportunity to, so I must. Tell me about the name, the choice of the name, One If by Cards, Two If by Comics.
Okay, so this is probably one of my biggest professional regrets. We were in the Candlelight one night, enjoying.
Oh yeah, the restaurant.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they're still there too.
Westchester Institution.
Yeah, best wings around. So we were having dinner. We were brainstorming about opening a store. And the name, I'm a U.S. history fan, so One If by Land, Two If by Sea. So we happened to be eating wings. I took out a pen. I wrote the name down. Little did I know that very few people actually know about U.S. history, particularly ones from the Revolutionary time. So a lot of people would come in and say, "Is this one cards, two comics?" It's like, no. Look at the sign. Do you see the if by in there? So then we started working with a marketing person about 10 years in, and he said, listen, you got to change your name. I said, fine, we'll change the name.
Well, it's funny with the name because in doing my research for today, I just did a quick Google search, and I think it was either a Google review or a Yelp review. Someone had written like, oh, they changed their awful original title or something like that. I don't know. I liked it. I don't know.
I mean, I liked it at the time, but then after answering the phones for a while, it takes forever to say. Although we would answer One If by Cards, which is fine. But even then, a lot of people just didn't get it. And some people thought it was half cards and comics. It's like, no, it's not half cards and comics.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess I always would refer to it in shorthand as One If.
As do
One
we.
If,
yeah.
Right?
Which, again, that's why we shouldn't have had a super long name, because if you're going to abbreviate it anyway, you might as well just go right to the point.
Yeah. It's a tough thing. I mean, I like the fact that you had cards and comics in the name of the store. We've talked about this many times. Alternate realities, first of all, it doesn't necessarily roll off the tongue when you're answering the phone quickly. And again, people would always think we were a real estate agent with alternate realties all the time.
Right. Well, right now we get American Legion. A lot of times we'll get older people calling up and they're talking about booking the hall. And I said, I'm sorry, we don't have a hall. We're a baseball card store. Okay, thank you.
I guess the point is, no matter what name you choose, people are going to struggle with it, I guess.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that you can't anticipate what's going to happen into the future. Even if you were to recite the name 100 times to yourself, you can't possibly imagine what someone's going to come up with.
No. Honestly, even the name of this show, My Comic Shop History, and then my documentary project is My Comic Shop Country. I mean, I can't tell you how many people, My Comic Book, whatever, and so if whatever the title is, I think people will find a way to mess it up. So it's all right. This is jumping ahead, and obviously I want to spend time in that One If era, but when you made the decision to switch, so you said you hired a marketing or a brand consultant?
A marketing person.
And so they suggested the name change?
Yeah, he said, listen, he's like, it's just not... Again, it doesn't roll off the tongue. One advantage that we did have with the One If name by using the numeral one instead of the spelled out version is we got the top billing in the phone book. So the impetus, one of the reasons for American Legends is obviously A comes before everything else. And we had a couple of other names that were bandied about, a couple that I liked that I won't say because I'm just in case we do something else. But it was generic enough, which you need to a degree, but it also kind of lent itself to Americana, which was appropriate for what we were looking for.
Yeah, and have you found that it conveys enough of what the store is about for potential customers?
To a degree, I think again with just two names or a single name, it's just impossible to get all that information out with a wide variety of items that you carry. And you look at other stores in the industry as well, and it's hard. It's really hard to get everything in a short and succinct manner. So you do your best.
Right. Was there any, because to make a big change like that, was there any fear of, not necessarily losing existing customers, but people having a harder time finding?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There was a legitimate fear of losing existing customers because when you hear a business, if someone pulls up and sees the sign and maybe some people are turned off. I'm used to dealing with them. They're gone. I'm out of here. Or they'll come up and they'll look for the exact sign, and if they don't see that exact sign, they might not pull into the mall. Maybe they just keep driving. or just the same when they call up. You just don't know what people are thinking.
Now, with the renaming, did that also come with a refocusing squarely on cards and less so on comics, or did that come later?
That came a little bit later. I think when probably about 4 years later, we noticed that we were selling a lot of back issues in the 90s, and we were getting a lot of people bringing in books, typically 70s, 60s, and the odd Golden Age collection. But that started to really diminish as the late 90s started rolling around and into the 2000s. And the only things that the only back issues that we were able to acquire were literally the ones that were going unsold off the rack. And consequently, our back issue sales just fell right through the floor. And in terms of square footage, the back issues were taking up a ton of space. We had 10,000 of them, and there were months going by where we were selling just a handful. And after a while, you start to wonder, all right, why are we doing this? And we still carried all the mainstream current books, and we still had a following of people coming in for those. But and I'm certainly not adverse to buying Golden Age or Silver Age to this day. And in fact, yesterday I was fortunate enough to buy someone's collection who had about 3,000 like Bronze Age books, and also had a Green Lantern one and a Daredevil one. So that's always nice.
Yeah, that's cool. So now, where will those be in the store? Because you don't have the back issue bins anymore.
We don't. So it's funny. And this is one aspect of the business that I do like, that when we do purchase a collection like that, I'll typically just keep it behind the counter in a temporary fashion. And people like the deal aspect. So when they walk in the door, a lot of times people will see a pile of comics and go, oh, what's that? And then they'll start picking through it. And you wind up, because of the immediacy of it, and people like getting first crack at everything, we'll wind up going through a lot more comics from there in a short period of time than we would had we had them displayed in the bins for a significantly longer period of time. And as far as the higher end books, the Daredevil and the Green Lantern, they'll be in our eBay store.
Sure.
So.
Okay. And you still do carry new comics.
We do.
You have your racks there. I see they go like just a few issues back. What happens to them after that point?
Yeah, so sadly, they come off the rack and we wind up closing them out. Usually I'll sell them in bulk to a discounter and take a pounding on them, but you got to move product.
And you still have reservists and Wednesday regulars?
We do, yeah. It's funny. I was thinking about this morning on the lead up to the interview. What Wednesdays used to be like, we'd have maybe a dozen people milling around the front of the store, waiting for the truck to show up. Back when there was a truck, and with the Heroes World truck, I guess, and Diamond as well, and sometimes the truck would show up an hour late, 2 hours late, and I would think, don't these people have to be back at work? But they didn't care. And now it's a lot more relaxed. Obviously, the comics come in early. We put them out right before we close and shut the door the night before, and then people kind of come in at their leisure. So
we always wondered the same thing, because for years AR opened at 2 p.m. on Wednesday. So we would spend the morning and early afternoon getting everything set up. And, again, we'd have that line of people out the door. And, 2 o'clock, it could be a late lunch hour, I suppose. But we always had that same question. It's like, don't you have somewhere to be? But, again, that passion. And,
yes.
Even if it was taking a later hour or making it work some other way, they did it.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. But generally speaking, in terms of the identity of the store and what you view it as, primarily a sport card and memorabilia
today,
shop?
absolutely, yeah. And I'd say more than anything, a vintage sports card store. Our primary business now are cards produced from before 1970. We carry all the newest sports card releases, and we still have a solid following of people who come in to bust their wax boxes, which is nice. And we certainly sell all the modern singles as well, but the bread and butter is the vintage cards. That's what we're known for. We're known for buying it, and we're known for selling it. So.
When Alternate Realities closed a few years ago, did you notice any uptick in comics customers?
No, surprisingly not. A handful of people, but you wonder where those people went, because obviously there just aren't a ton of stores around. But now today, comics are consumed in such a different way that they were 20 years ago, either by subscription or online, and you do wonder though.
Yeah, and that's certainly been a theme of this season. big picture, when we compare the Westchester comic shop scene of yesterday and today, I mean, there's far fewer shops. I mean, it diminished by a staggering amount.
I was having this conversation with someone before, even about baseball card stores, and he was saying he's from Bergen County and how there are, I think, 6 in Bergen County. And I was kind of surprised because I don't know what it is about this area that scares people away. I mean, certainly it's not an inexpensive area, but then neither is Bergen County.
Right. And so that's another big thing that I'm so curious about. And this is just, my own ignorance. Like, I'm pleasantly surprised the fact that the sport card market is still viable. Like, people are still coming in for that, and then, like, buying new cards, or primarily the vintage?
Both.
Yeah.
It's possibly the strangest thing to me, and I'm a little bit jaded because I've been doing this since the year one, but the values of some of the modern cards is staggering. I mean, there are some Mike Trout cards that have gone for 6 figures. There are some Tom Brady cards that have gone for that amount. And certainly even some of the modern comics, like the first Harley Quinn, mm-hmm. and you see some of the super high grade stuff from the 90s and what it goes for. It's really staggering.
Yeah.
But I think for this, and speaking of going off on tangents, which I'm very good at doing, as far as the modern card market, you could see how the speculativeness of some of these high-end rookies just fuels everything, be it Trout or Ohtani or anyone like that. There are some really rare cards that are being issued, and for some people it's a lottery ticket mentality.
Right.
So, I mean, there certainly are a lot of collectors who want to get the most recent things and just, they want their favorite players and whatnot. But there are certainly some people who wouldn't mind hitting, a $5,000 or $10,000 card. No, and certainly I wouldn't either.
Right. Yeah, and it's especially interesting to me because I don't follow sports anymore. I don't collect the cards, so I'm not like plugged into that at all. I mean, I remember being a kid getting the Beckett price guide. Do those still come out?
Oh, they do.
Yeah. So, there was a period of time where, again, I was really following it, but I haven't in years. And, I mean, I'm curious, like, do kids come in and buy
They do,
sports
absolutely.
cards?
Yeah.
All right.
It's nice. Actually, one of the strange things that's happened is, and it's happened with Pokemon first, and then it's happened with sports cards second. The Pokemon generation was pretty much 20 years ago, and those kids are now adults, and their kids are into Pokemon, and the same thing is happening with the sports card generation. Whereas maybe 5 or 10 years ago there was a little bit of a gap because a lot of people weren't into it for that time period, so their kids weren't. But now the people your age,
right,
those are the ones who are trying to get that instilled in their children, this love of collecting and the hobby.
Yeah, no, that's great. And again, I guess kind of my assumption was like, I guess it's just, I figured kids have so many things competing for their attention these days. And we've, talked about it in the context of comics, like how hard it is, to get kids into the store and to get them reading and all of that. So I just assumed like, well, it must be, similar with the cards, but that's great that they're still into it.
And speaking of which, you should actually look at your late 90s basketball cards because there are some very expensive cards, particularly some of the Jordan inserts. And I'm not even talking about the autographed ones, but some of the numbered ones are worth a lot of money. So you should definitely look through those.
All right. I do have a box of my entire basketball card collection. I almost brought it today,
but
I was lugging all the podcast stuff. I'll come back in the future. That's actually something that I guess I'm kind of debating because on the one hand, I haven't looked through them in years. And again, they're just in a box in a closet, so I'm not getting anything out of them. But, we do have our baby coming, and
right.
There's a little bit of that element of like, well, maybe I should have them, not so much to pass them on for any value, but just to kind of say, like, this was something I put together once. I don't know.
And I suspect the baby will look at you and say, I don't care.
Yeah, that's kind of what my prediction is. So I'm probably, most likely, you'll see me again at some point with that box of basketball cards.
Well, most of the people who wind up selling us cards are generally my age, early 50s to mid to late 60s. And they've collected for a while. Maybe they've lost interest. They've tried to get their kids to develop an interest in it, and they haven't. And the person will say, well, when I die, I'll leave them to you. And the kids will say, I'm just going to throw them away or give them away. And the person figures, well, I've invested a lot of money in this. I'd actually like to either give you the money or get some kind of fair value for them. And that's kind of the impetus for getting them to sell. So,
yeah, I think I will take that step probably sooner rather than later. And just as far as the cards generally, so obviously you specialize in sports cards. I did see Pokemon up front.
Yes.
Have you ever carried any of the other role-playing games like Magic or anything like that?
We had a little bit of Magic in the 90s. We haven't in years. We did Yu-Gi-Oh! In the late 90s, and that was huge, and now not so much. But pretty much just straight sports cards. And we were doing the non-sport as well. Back during the Star Wars prequel movies, we sold a ton of product. And we still carry all the Star Wars releases and generally most of the science fiction releases as well.
So how many times has someone come in and told you that their mother or someone threw away their baseball card collection?
I think we're up to 3 million at this point. The funniest thing is actually people will kind of give you the background of the story and then tell you how their mom threw their cards away. And when they say it, usually they say it to you as if it's the first time the phrase has ever been uttered. And when Donna and I started working together, she would love to talk to people when they would say that. And I said to her, I go, give it 6 months and you're going to start rolling your eyes. And sure enough, after a while, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can only imagine how many times that's happened. Yeah, and I mean, I guess it must be tough because on the one hand, you don't want to seem callous, right? Like this is something that was obviously like traumatic for them.
Right.
Like you've heard it so many times. I guess you got to try to find that balance.
It's tough. I guess I liken it to the fact of when, and I'm sure you got this and have since done it, when you were really young and people much older than you would look at you and say, I remember you when you were such and such age. And it used to drive me crazy. And now I'm my age and I'm actually doing it to people and it serves me right, I guess.
Everything comes around.
It does.
Can you talk to me about the atmosphere that you strive to cultivate here? Because I would say, comparing, One If and American Legends 2 AR, alternate reality has always had more of that like clubhouse feel, be a little more cluttered, a little messier. Opportunity for discovery, yes, but definitely a little messier. Steve, the owner, could be a little ornery at times. Great guy, and the customers loved him, but
he always amused me.
Had that edge to him. And then looking at your store and relatively similar amount of space to work with, but always immaculate, always very neat, very clean, very bright and well lit. I don't think I've ever seen you in a t-shirt. You always have a collared shirt of some sort. I mean, I'm assuming those were all very conscious choices.
It was when we opened. We have a Scarsdale address. I mean, we're just across the border from Yonkers, but we wanted to cultivate more of a high-end store. We wanted to have not necessarily high-end customers, but we wanted to have a store that a mom wouldn't be embarrassed walking into with their kids and feel concerned. I've been in retailing for a while, pretty much my whole life. I believe people need to be able to find what they're looking for. It needs to be organized in a logical way. I'm also pretty OCD, as is Donna, as is Crystal, who works for us. So it kind of works out that way. And it's to the point if I'm walking by the showcase and if I see a card that's out of chronological order, it'll actually bother me enough that I'll walk around and correct it, even if I have something significantly more important to do.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I mean, obviously it served you well that you lasted this long.
Well, also, I think the most frustrating thing as a retailer is when you have somebody who's interested in buying something and you can't find it. Mm-hmm. So consequently, all our inventory is organized to the point where if someone's looking for something, we can look it up, we know where it's going to be, and we can make the sale. And that's what it's all about.
You mentioned that you liked Steve. I'm curious, to hear about your relationship with the other Westchester comic shops. Obviously, I know you had the falling out with Dragon's Den.
We still, it's funny, even with the falling out, I was there forever, so I had friendships with a lot of the people there, and I'm still Facebook friends with a bunch of them. And I got to say, even though things didn't end well, I mean, we had some just great times. I mean, the days were crazy, and they were just. I mean, I was, we were young. We were in our early 20s. Even I was in my late teens at times, and there were just so many crazy memories of that place. So I still think back on those days very fondly.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. In the previous episode this season, I had Saad Siddiqui, a former worker at Comic Book Heaven, and he spoke about how Morris used to do the framing for you guys.
Yes. Morris is probably the most unique person I've ever met in this business, and that's saying something. But I could still remember the first time we met him. It was maybe a month or so or less after we opened. And he came in and he had something he was selling, and he just laid it right out. He said, "Listen, this is what I want to get." He goes, "If you want to buy it, fine. If you don't want to buy it, fine. We'll part ways as friends." I'm like, I like this guy. And, he was no nonsense. He said what was on his mind. You knew where you stood with him. And we actually developed a pretty good friendship. He was probably 20, 25 years older than I was. And it almost became like a father-son kind of thing. I mean, I was never close to my own father. I don't think he was particularly close to his own son, but he and I had a lot in common personally. And we would just talk about everything. I mean, we talk about sports, politics, religion, medicine. He's just a very bright guy, almost a Renaissance man. He could do a lot of different things and always interesting to talk to and just a great sense of humor.
Unfortunately, I never had the opportunity to meet him, but it was interesting hearing you describe him and hearing Saad talk about him in the previous episode as well. Very interesting to get a sense of, who this person was. Any other specific, or anything specific about the other comic shop owners or managers of the time that really stands out as you look back?
He was the one that he and Irene and the Comic Book Heaven crew were the ones we had the most interaction with. I would see Steve from time to time, and we always had a pretty good relationship, good sense of humor. I actually liked his acerba qualities, especially when he would go on one of his rants. He was a funny guy.
Yes, he's known for that.
but no, it's funny. The other stores we just didn't really interact with a whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, from my perspective, especially working at Alternate Realities.
So what was that like?
Yeah.
What was he like as a boss?
I have a whole season of episodes.
Yeah, I can imagine.
No, it was great. It was great working there. He was a great boss. He always prided himself, and I can attest to this. I mean, he never asked us to do anything that he wouldn't do himself. So, he's very generous, and he was great to work for.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. And I mean, as far as the relationship between the stores, I mean, I know, our sports card selection was very, very minimal. So whenever people would come to ask about that, in almost every instance, we would refer them to you. And I think we got the sense you would refer people to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you guys definitely had a much wider, we were pretty much mainstream, like Marvel, DC, Valiant, Image. But if it was something by a smaller publisher, more than likely we wouldn't carry it. So we would certainly send people to you.
Gotcha. As far as working there, I mean, it was pretty informal. I mean, I'm curious, again, obviously I never worked here. What's the dynamic like between you guys and your employees? Any rules that they have to follow or anything like that?
So we used to have a lot more employees. As we were doing a lot more over the counter, you needed at least 2 people here. Or you need 3 people here pretty much at all times. So, I think in a small business, particularly in this industry, there's only so much formality you can have when you're kind of, it's to a degree, it's a laid back industry. I think of the movie Almost Famous, when he says the reason we got into this business is because we didn't want responsibility. So we might have had rules written down. Did we strictly enforce them? More than likely not. I mean, at the end of the day, we're the boss and what we say goes, but when you have like 4 or 5 or 6 employees, you become friends with them. That's just the way it is. And as long as the request is reasonable, more than likely we're going to say yes.
Right. As the Westchester comic shop scene has changed, as we've discussed, and especially a few years ago when Steve posted his final manifesto of why he was closing. I mean, I guess
that was a great read, by the way.
Did you enjoy that? What was your reaction as you were reading it?
I'm still picking my jaw off the ground.
Could you imagine yourself posting anything like that?
No, I can imagine myself writing something like that, but then Donna saying, no, don't throw that away.
But I'm curious, as you've seen a lot of these other stores fade away, I mean, I guess what is your reaction? Because on the one hand, maybe there's a sense of like, well, okay, maybe those customers will come here. But on the other hand, I mean, is it, indicative of, lack of interest in this in the area generally? Like, as you've seen these stores go, what has the reaction been?
It's a little bit mixed. I mean, it's sad in a way, certainly, but clearly the comics industry is very strong. I mean, just walk by any movie theater today. I mean, there's a comic book movie everywhere. Everyone knows all the characters. I mean, did you ever think there'd be Guardians of the Galaxy movie? Of course not. I mean, it was Superman and Batman, and that was it. I mean, granted, now there are still way too many Superman and Batman movies, and relaunches and more relaunches. But I mean, considering how long the business has been around, it's I think it's still very strong, and that's kind of gratifying. Maybe a little bit sad at the way things have turned out in terms of the overall volume of stores, but unfortunately, business is ever evolving, and that's just the way things are.
Yeah. What about this area generally? Like, for example, there used to be a movie theater directly across from you. It's a Party City now. There used to be a Blockbuster, right? On the strip,
right next door.
Right next door.
Next door, yeah.
Not my go-to Blockbuster, but I would go there occasionally. I would typically go to the one on Tarrytown Road. That was more convenient for me. But that's been gone now.
Almost 20 years.
Really, that long? Amazing. And then now you have the Alamo Draft House.
Yes.
Where Movieland used to be.
Right.
Right? Any like spillover from people like going to see like a superhero movie?
No, we tried back when Phantom Menace opened to really try to cross promote and get a lot of the people from the movies to come over here, because we had all the toys, we had the cards. I mean, we had a ton of merch, and people just didn't take to it. You try, and sometimes it doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, no, very true. And then, of course, Dragon's Den is no more now. It's been
Barnes & Noble since like 96, I think, or 97.
Yeah. So, as far as buying collections, you've touched on this already, but I guess how regularly are you buying, specifically the card collections?
Almost every day.
Wow.
Yeah, actually, about 20 minutes before you came in, I bought a little mini collection, but got something shipped to me in the mail from someone in Illinois today. I bought 2 deals yesterday, like 3 the day before, and they're all various quantities and sizes and ages. I've been a little less selective in terms of enforcing my strict pre-1970 policy, because the reality is there are now some cards that are quite a bit newer that are desirable. Certainly, I would say the ones from 81 to 92, with very few exceptions, there are none that are desirable, certainly for baseball. I could probably name 4 cards off the top of my head from, that 11, 12-year period that I would buy. But there are starting to have gems pop up from the late 90s, early 2000s, as I was mentioning about the basketball cards. And there are certainly those from football and baseball and hockey as well.
Right. How often are you like turning a collection away? Or is it the case that like I don't want to say take anything, but like if for a certain price, like you would take it? So
the exception to I'll take it at any price would be if someone comes in with, 88 Donruss, 90 tops, 87 tops. And then sometimes, people will say, well, I tell you what, I'll sell you this box for only $25. And I said, literally, if you gave this to me, I would say thank you, but no thank you. Right. And then sometimes they'll look at you thinking you're joking. And I say, look behind the counter. Because the way I'll buy a collection sometimes, if I go to someone's house, maybe they're moving, and 80% of the stuff they have is junk, but 20% is good material, and I want it. But they want me to take everything. So I've already factored that out, but it's more of almost a clean out of someone's home. So you take it and you try to sell it, and realistically, I know no one's going to buy it, so it'll either make its way into the dumpster or a donation if somebody even wants it.
Right. Yeah, it's, because at Alternate Realities, people would come in looking to sell comics all the time, and even if you talked to them over the phone first and said, like, we're only looking for comics from this period, they would always, oh, that's what I have. It's really old comics. And, that was the classic story. They'd come in with their really old comics and they'd be from, the 90s.
And they would probably be angry with you.
Yeah, usually. Thankfully, we could always hide behind Steve because he was the one who made the decision.
Right.
So it's just like, well, it's up to him.
And then if you've gotten in any trouble, Big Sean would come out.
Who used to work here.
Yes.
He used to work here, and as the story goes, I think the AR crew thought he was a spy that you sent over when he initially came over to Alternate Realities.
That's funny. He's a good guy.
So you celebrated your 25th anniversary a couple years back.
Yes.
What was that celebration like?
It was amazing, actually. You do these plans for months in advance, and we did a big lead up. And we were giving stuff away leading up to it. And then we gave away big prizes every hour on the hour during that day. And we were very fortunate. We had a lot of our friends and family come by. And then, as I mentioned before, we had all these old customers we hadn't seen in years. And we got a cake, and we had a podcast as well. Our first one, you're our second. And I think you kind of have expectations of how busy you're going to be. But when we opened the door and it was wall-to-wall people, from the second we opened, we both looked at each other and went, oh, I didn't think this was going to happen. So we pretty much had cake as our meal for the day. But, we were running on adrenaline. We had a great time. And it was just, more than anything, obviously, we had a very successful day. But it was just nice to be reminded and taken back to the early 90s and what a fun, exciting time it was to build a business and see how things have developed over time.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine something like that would be very, reinvigorating because I'm sure, we've spoken a lot about the challenges of running a store like this. And so, to have something that celebratory and that well attended, I'm sure, makes you feel great.
It does. It's funny. I have something I say to our employee, Crystal, all the time is when something goes wrong, and I don't mean something in terms of running the shop. I just mean like one of the lights goes out, or the last year the air conditioner went, or I need to do something that I just don't really want to deal with. I look at her and I say, all I want to do is play with baseball cards. and it was nice to have a day like that where all the extraneous stuff that kind of grinds you down on a daily basis is gone, and it's just all pure joy, memories, and good people, and fun, and the thing that gave you the passion to start this business to begin with.
Right. So, I mean, you started as a baseball card collector, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So, and you still maintain that passion for it?
I do. It's funny. I don't really collect personally anymore. It's strange because I think once you start to buy and sell, you almost can't go back to just buying alone and being a collector. I mean, I still have a little amount of my own personal collection, but I still get juiced up every time I go to drive and look at a deal, or when someone comes in, particularly someone who's older and has a bag, and you're like, oh, I wonder what's in that bag. And then they open the bag and it's like 88 Topps. And you're like, oh my God, you're like 90 years old. Why do you have cards from like 30 years ago? You should have cards from 60 years ago. So, but it's exciting because I don't know if you probably watch Pawn Stars. What Rick always says, you never know what's going to walk in. And to a large degree, it's true, which is nice because every day is a little bit different. I mean, who wants to do the same exact thing every day of their life? That's not exactly fun.
Right. No, it's great. I mean, it's so encouraging to hear you still have enthusiasm for this after 27 years.
I love this. You kidding? I get to play with baseball cards all day. What could be better?
We're still a few years away, but have you started thinking at all about the 30th, the big 30th anniversary?
No, actually, not one bit.
Another name change, maybe? No.
No. We're done. We're done changing names. We're at the top of the directory, and we're staying that way.
Over the course of this podcast, over these 5 seasons, like we've talked a lot about the retailer's relationship with publishers, the comics publishers, with Diamond, the distributor, of course, with the customers. And I'm curious because, again, I don't know the sports card world. So I think I read an interview that you gave. It might have been for the 25th anniversary where you said that sometimes it feels like you're squeezed in between the manufacturers and the customers.
To a degree, yes. I think any small business owner probably feels that way regardless of what business they're in. I'm sure restaurants feel that way as well between, the food suppliers and the customers. Being in a small business has a lot of challenges. You obviously want to make your customers happy at all points, but a lot of times maybe you're dealing with people on the supply side who they don't really need you. So you don't have any leverage on the people above you. But also, ironically, you also have no leverage on the people who you're selling to who have leverage on you. So you do get squeezed a lot on both ends, and you obviously you have to make your customers happy. That's why you're here. You don't necessarily have to make your suppliers happy. They should be making you happy, but that doesn't always work that way.
So, just for my own education, so the card manufacturers, we're talking like Upper Deck,
Upper Deck, Topps, Panini are the three ones, the three major ones that are around today.
And then, are you ordering from them directly, or there's a distributor?
No, we actually deal with a distributor now. We were direct for a long time. We're selling less of the newer releases, and I kind of like at this point for our business to just do the distributor thing for new products for cards, because inevitably right now cards are very hot as far as new product. The manufacturers have cut back on supply over the last couple of years. There will come a point where there will be a reversal, and I think it's not going to be pretty when it happens. And I think a lot of the new people who've gotten into it, who've never seen a downturn, are going to, if you want to talk about being squeezed, they're going to get really squeezed.
Yeah.
So,
very interesting. Yeah, and what's the distributor?
It's a GTS.
Are there multiple, or is it like Diamond where there's just the one?
No, there are multiple distributors. I mean, there are some bigger distributors scattered throughout the country, but I mean, they're probably the biggest one in the Northeast.
Okay. And then, like, you sell the individual packs and boxes?
Yes, and as well as the factory sets when those come out from Topps.
Okay. It's again, I used to spend a lot of time, poring over, looking at the case, which I'm staring at right now, looking at the individual cards and buying the packs. I remember one time I was sick at home, and I'd taken a nap, and I woke up and my mom had come and gotten me. I want to say it was an Allen Iverson card that I had my eye on, and I was very excited about that. And I used to trade them at school, like the friends of mine who were into that as well. Again, while it's something that I don't have anymore, the passion for it. I mean, I have very fond memories of it. It was a lot of fun.
Well, that was a good time. You started collecting in a good time period. You see, you had the Iverson, Kobe,
yeah.
Jordan was still around. Right after we opened, Shaq was the big rookie, and you talk about how everything kind of came to a head at one time. So we open up, and Superman gets killed off. Okay, pretty much the biggest event in comic history. Mainstream coverage everywhere. I mean, they're doing Death of Superman skits on Saturday Night Live. Followed up with Shaquille O'Neal, who's the most highly touted basketball rookie of all time. So fast forward 4 or 5 years later, everyone has these. They're massively overproduced. Everyone drops out of the industry, and the production on everything goes way down. And when you start collecting again with Kobe and Iverson and even those late 90s Jordans, the supplies are significantly less, which is why those are now pretty good cards.
Right. Yeah, I know. It's fascinating, the cycles that these go in. But so, like I was saying, when we talk about comic shops, we talk about challenges in the form of lack of returnability. I know retailers, have an issue with the quantity and quality of product being
yes.
put out there, things like that. From your perspective, dealing with the sports, I mean, what types of challenges are you facing that might be akin to that?
I think comics have an advantage that cards don't for retailers, in the sense that now with the online ordering with Diamond, you can adjust pretty much right up until the comics are coming out, and that really does eliminate a lot of the mistakes. The one disadvantage is we're not selling as much as we used to, so if you make a mistake, you're pretty much sure of either losing money or not making money. As far as the cards go, you have to make commitments to product many months in advance. And you know what? There could be an economic downturn. Someone who's a hot rookie can wind up blowing out a knee. And, you've already made a commitment to purchase X amount, and product rolls in, and, everyone's stuck in either a cash crunch from the economy tanking. So you're not selling it at retail, plus the wholesale price is tanked. You have manufacturers who can decide, well, this is going to be a super successful product. Let's keep the presses going a little bit longer. So what started out as a decision that you made, which was a good decision at the time, you're working with imperfect information, turns out 2 or 3 months down the road, it was a disastrous decision. So
Interesting. So how many months in advance are you ordering?
So right now, for some of the products, it's anywhere like 2 to 3 months.
Okay. So that is similar to, obviously like ordering comics through previews. But yeah, certainly a lot of X factors that can come up in between. So yeah, it's a whole other world that, I never knew sort of the behind the scenes of. It's very interesting.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of certainty.
Yeah. So, you've been doing this a long time. I mean, you've amassed certainly a level of expertise in this. So do you find that you're often consulting others, or do people look to you as an expert?
Yeah, I do a lot of appraisals. I've done some consulting on behalf of people in some legal matters. Been interviewed for a lot of different articles and publications. So yeah, I get my fair share of pub. And thank you again for the interview, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's this is, again, I've been excited to revisit all of the stores featured this season.
Well, it's your childhood. I mean,
it's my childhood. That they all played a role. They were all part of my routine. And this one in particular, I went to Comic Book Heaven a bunch of times, but I wasn't a regular customer. It wasn't a weekly thing. But this was. My mom would bring me. I guess when I was certain times she would come in. Obviously, like she met both of you. Then there might have been times where she just waited in the car and I came in by myself. But I asked her this, and she didn't remember. But when I left to go to Alternate Realities, I said, "Did we tell Mark and Donna? I hope. Do you have any memory of this or no?"
I don't, but
hopefully we did.
So this is probably, and I could see Steve ranting about this because this is probably like the comic shop owner's number one pet peeve. You do the files every week. And there's that one point where you kind of like, you're looking through the file and you're like, wait a minute, why is there 5 consecutive numbered issues of the same title? And that's when you start to think, oh, we're going to die with these, aren't we? And you call the number, it's either out of service or the person says, yeah, I don't want those. Well, that's great, but you could have told us this 3 or 4 months ago.
Right.
So, and like we've discussed, the comics aren't returnable. And at that point, what do you do? Mm-hmm. You don't do anything. You wind up eating them.
I believe we.
I'm sure you did. You're a man of high character.
Well, but again, at the time, I didn't know all of the ins and outs of this. But we'll go with that we did. But actually, on that note of reservists, do you have when a new set of cards is coming out? Do you have people who reserve them in advance?
Yeah, we have people that have specific buying patterns, and if the Topps complete set for the year is coming out, we have about a dozen people that we know. All right, we'll give them a call. They bought this in the past, or even if a new particular baseball issue comes out or hockey issue, we have a couple of people actually this week who we put stuff aside for, and they haven't specifically said we want this, but just knowing their buying patterns, we'd rather be safe and give it to a regular customer who's going to really appreciate it than someone who just walks in who is going to buy something, spur of the moment.
I have one more question about the future, but before that, what have I not asked you about your experience here that has been a defining element of One If by Cards, Two If by Comics / American Legends?
That's a tough one. We actually, so when we first opened, we were partners with a hockey player, Darren Turcotte of the New York Rangers. He actually got traded probably 4 or 5 months, about a year after we opened. And then unfortunately, the Rangers won the Cup after he got traded, which I think back to that, had he still been on the team, what would 1994 have been like in the store? As it was, the first half of the year was phenomenally successful. And then there was the baseball lockout / strike of the middle of 94, and our business just went right off the cliff. So I kind of wonder back then, what would have happened? Would that have kind of carried us through the year and kind of blunted some of the fall off in business that happened, which honestly lasted probably for a solid year. So there I go going off on a tangent again. But great. No, I was going to say, so because of Darren, we wound up doing a lot of player signings because of his contacts with the team, and we kind of carried that out for the last, pretty much up until last year, and we haven't done a signing since, but we've done over 100 players throughout that time. And actually, we had done a bunch of comic artists, including the Simonsons, another husband and wife team, and Don Heck, and a few other people who just nice people to be around.
So other than Darren, so was he the only other co-owner that you ever had?
He was a co-owner. We had a silent partner, and then a couple of my mom had bought in a small share, and my brother as well. So, but now it's just us.
Gotcha. Well, kind of, to wind this down here, I'm always curious about what you envision for the future. I mean, it doesn't sound like you guys have any, not looking to stop anytime soon.
No, definitely not.
But have you given any thought to, eventually, like a long time down the road, I mean, what do you envision for, like, what would you want to become of American Legends? Like, would you want to sell it to someone else and have it continue, or would you rather have it leave with you?
It's interesting. I don't really have a timeline in mind, so that it's kind of hard to say. I think regardless, I'd want to keep the name for myself. So if who knows how much of the internet is going to be in terms of our percentage of our business 10 or 20 years from now. 20 years from now, put me in my 70s. But I think with the internet aspect, I could certainly, we can continue doing this into old age if we wanted. Would I want to continually come to work every day 20, 25 years from now? Probably not. But I really haven't given it super long-term thought in that manner. Maybe I should, but to a degree, I'm a little of a fly by the seat of my pants person.
Yeah, well, certainly it's nothing pressing that you need to decide. No, it's just always interesting.
I haven't thought about the 30th anniversary, so I haven't thought about the 50th.
Yeah, because I could see it going either way. Like on the one hand, I think there's probably something attractive about like leaving that legacy. Like the store's still here, new people can discover it, bring their kids here, have it go on and on. But at the same time, right? Obviously, you wouldn't want it to continue and then become something that
we didn't.
betrays
right, exactly.
what your vision for it was, right? So,
and I think if we ever did sell the store, I would think whoever bought it would want to do their own thing and put their own imprint on it, which they absolutely would have the right to do. But again, I'm a little OCD. I want things done my way, so we're not going to let that happen, are we?
Just one last thing, speaking about
Sure.
the internet. So how big a part of the business is it?
It's a large amount.
Through eBay?
Yeah, we have an eBay store, AMER Legends. And we sell a ton of vintage graded cards and a lot of other oddball types items as well. And it's been great for us.
Yeah. And was that something that you were quick to adopt, or did it take some time to build up to it?
We jumped on eBay probably in like 98 and then started to do more and more business through it. And then as most comic book or baseball card retailers will tell you, the foot traffic just started to get less and less over the years, and other retailers as well could certainly vouch for that. And you have more time, and you have to decide, all right, is this what I want to keep doing, and what way can we make that happen and still be successful? And fortunately, we started to transition that way probably in about 2008, and started to, all right, let's see how much more we can put online and continue to serve customers and continue to have our business be at a certain level that we want it to be at.
Right. Well, I want to thank you so much for doing this. I'm so glad that you're both still here doing this, and I wish you lots of luck in the years ahead. And you'll probably see me again with my basketball card collection. I'll keep an eye out for 30th anniversary celebration news down the line a bit. So obviously people can come to the storefront here in person.
Absolutely.
But if they wanted to reach out to you otherwise, what's the best way to get in touch with the store?
Probably the best way is just to call us. We're at 914-725-2225. You could certainly drop us an email. My email address is mark@amerlegends.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you for being part of this episode.
Hey, thanks for coming in.
Thank you for being part of my comic shop history. So I am going to speak with your wife, Donna, in the after show, which will be available exclusively for members of the My Comic Shop History Patreon page. So if you'd like to hear that, be sure to sign up. And then we will be back with an all-new episode in 2 weeks. Until then, don't be a flat squirrel. If you like what you hear, please consider joining the My Comic Shop History Patreon page. I know we're all subscribed to a million different services these days, but your Patreon support helps me cover the costs associated with maintaining the podcast. Plus, you get access to a ton of exclusive bonus content, starting at the $1 level, including the My Comic Shop Book Club, Beyond My Comic Shop, and My Superfan History subseries. If you enjoy the regular episodes, I promise you'll dig the Patreon ones. Thanks to everyone who has already signed up.